Vlogmas edition or Craftmas. I haven't quite made up my mind. I kind of like them both. This is usually a knitting, sewing, general crafty YouTube channel, and to be honest it's not that much different when it comes to my vlogmas, because that is basically all I do. But I do in between do some baking and various other things, so I thought I would bring you along for the ride. As I have previously mentioned in my last couple of YouTubes, like the normal episodes, I probably won't do this every day. I did do that the last 2 years, but I think this time I'll just come in here and there, maybe every week, maybe every 5 days. We shall see. So, little elephant in the room. Ta-da! It is finished. My Christmas, well, not Christmas particularly, my festive bunny jumper is finished. I'm so excited. This is basically what this entire episode is going to be about, because I have completed my vintage 1940s Christmas jumper, festive jumper. I call it my festive jumper purely because of the colour choices. I originally had a pair of mittens that were in these 3 yarns, and then I did not succeed in knitting those mittens for various reasons, and when I looked at the colours I thought I could make a festive jumper. And so I had a little look on what vintage jumpers I had in my queue, and I chose this one. I have adjusted it quite a lot, so I will talk about that now. And I have to make a decision. I don't have the option for voiceover on my computer, so I may just throw in some videos and pictures over me talking. That might be what I do, because although my last 3, I would say 3 vintage jumpers I recorded start to finish so I could dedicate a whole episode to it, I just completely forgot to do that for some reason. So I don't have footage from every single part or of me doing everything or talking at all. So that will be today, and I'll bring you along. So let us go back to the humble beginnings of this jumper. So I went with Rama Finul yarn, the normal one. I think there are 2. There's Finul and lamb's wool, maybe? Yeah, Finul. I went with this one, and obviously the gauge is going to be completely different to a vintage pattern, and I've now discovered my gauge is completely different to what I should be getting anyway. I used 3.5mm needles for the body, and this is supposed to come up at about 26 to 24 stitches on 3.5mm needles in a 10cm or 4-inch gauge swatch, and mine was 32, which was a lot more. I didn't really think much of this because the original pattern for this was 34 stitches, and I thought, 32, that's fine. I won't go too off, like majorly off of the gauge. Then I asked my mum if she could do the welt at the bottom, which she agreed to. So I cast on the sleeves. I knitted the first sleeve and the second sleeve actually before she got here. All of this I changed to knitting in the round because I did not want to do all of this completely flat colour work, the entire jumper. But once I got to about here, this all went flat, so I did actually do some flat colour work, and obviously the same one here. And when I got to under the arms, I realised I am not going to have enough of the red and green to finish. So that is why this jumper is not quite as long as I wanted it, because I did actually want it a smidge longer. But alas, I wanted the bunnies higher up. I didn't want the white section to start down here. So I had everything going super well. It was all on gauge. All my calculations and measurements were all fine. And then, when I swapped to my stockinette in just one colour of the Ravelry No, I just kept my needles as normal, except my little change. So when I knit flat, this section here was flat. I think about 5 of these bunnies are knitted flat. They were knitted on 3.5. When I got to the white, I changed to 3.5 on my knit side and 3.25 on my purl. This was kind of disastrous and ended up making this white section really, really big. My knitting is evidently quite tight, but my purling is not at all. And usually knitting one smaller, like a 0.25 millimeter needle lower, balances it out, but for some reason it did not do that. So after I had done all of this section, I realised it's way too big. So I ripped it all out and I went down to a 3mm needle on my knitting and a 2.75 for my purl, thinking this would solve everything. And I even decreased about 7 or 8 stitches out, thinking this would definitely help. It did not. It was a disaster. With all of this confidence that I had changed my needles, the gauge was definitely smaller, I noticed that although my gauge here was 8 stitches in 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters, this one was about 7-ish, which is why I took out those extra 7 stitches here. I'm trying now to remember, did I take 7 out both sides, or was it just 7 in total? But anyway, I sewed it all together. I seamed everything. I blocked it and I seamed it and I did the buttons and I got everything, and then I tried it on. And it was not good. The sleeves were down here. I definitely have a picture or a video to show you. I was so disheartened. And the welt that my mum had knitted when she was here, we were trying desperately to try to figure out her gauge, because her gauge is a lot tighter than mine. So I initially decided on the number for cast on, but then when she actually cast it on, it looked so small. And we measured her gauge in comparison to mine, because my rib gauge is here. Hers was a lot tighter. So we just went with the stitch count that was in the pattern, and I decided I wouldn't increase any more. Because in the pattern you cast on, for example, let's say 240 if we were doing it in the round, which we did, then it would say increase every blah amount of rows to get to 260. Well, that would have been way too many stitches for me. So I just kept with the 240 and went up and did not increase at any point, so that I would have 0 ease across my chest, and then I would decrease to the amount of inches or centimeters from the measurements that I have. This was all going fine and dandy, and I had exactly how many I needed across here, and then it all went downhill with this white section. And if I had not run out of the red and green, this jumper would have fit. It would have been fine. But because I did not, this is exactly the section that went all wrong. So I would say there were tears, but there weren't actual tears. There were just lots of frustrations. So after I did that, I've tried it on and realised that this is way too big. So I've just discovered I have some stretchy thread. So I'm going to sew that through at some point. I don't know if I'll do it like soon, or if I'll do it, I don't know. I've got to make a decision when I'll do it, but I want to put it through here so that it nips it in a bit more, because could definitely do with about 50 or 40 stitches less than we have. But it's fine, it's fine. It's not the end of the world because I figured I can wear a belt around it or tuck it into my skirts, and I have a different like stretchy belt that I can put around, so it's fine. It's just, if we're getting nitpicky, that is a slight faux pas. And what else? Basically working with someone else's tension and yours on a vintage jumper that you're making up the numbers. It's kind of a recipe for disaster, but a fun recipe. I had great fun doing this entire knit right up until the seaming and then realising it was not the right size. I definitely felt like throwbacks to that chevron jumper that I made where I just knitted it to the pattern with sport weight yarn and didn't measure anything, and then was very shocked that it didn't fit. But yeah, I actually did all the maths and all the calculations and everything was fine, but I didn't realise that this would throw off my gauge so much, especially with changing the needles significantly. 2.75 versus 3.5. You'd think it would eventually even out. If anything, you'd think it would be tighter, but no. So the other thing I noticed was there's a lot more like fabric in these sleeves than my last poof shoulder. So I don't know quite why there's so much more poof. It's alright from the side. I guess it's just a silhouette that's quite, hello, I'm here, look at my broad shoulders, but I'm getting used to it. I have been speaking with my friend on Instagram and she has been helping me through the dramas and cheering me on, so thank you. And she suggested to put some ribbon on the inside here, which would help to hoik it up just a little bit more, because you'll see I did actually bring it in by about an inch. I ended up ripping out all that seaming, re-seaming it, and bringing in about an inch or so of fabric on each side and seaming it in. But again, it's just a bit, that's the end of my shoulder bone right there. So it's just at the end. It could just do with being a little bit higher. But after 5 hours of seaming, I was not ripping that out again. It's only really me that's going to see it, aside from, you know, you guys all over the world on the internet. But it's not the end of the world, and I think the fit is relatively fine. It was worse. And with the ribbon, just bringing it up a little bit more, I think it will be perfecto. Okay, maybe perfect is it's pushing it. It will be how I want it to be. What else? I did adjust this, so this is not the original pattern because of my yarn. I was using Squidney's School of Vintage Knitting on Patreon. She has several patterns and she has different calculations to help you get the right fit. And the home front jumper was the one I was originally going with, but that one does up at the back, and I do not like having to do up my buttons like this. So I opted for the buttons just here, and that one I took from the Maureen jumper. The Maureen actually has it on both sides, but one side was enough. So that's what I did there. The original pattern didn't have any buttons, it had a closure of some kind, like a crocheted loop that you slot over something, a popper, I think. I am going to try that out another time. But with this one I was happily going along with the measurements, thinking it's all going to work out because my last two jumpers did using these calculations. So yeah, next time I'll go wild and follow a different style of doing up the jumper. What else can I say? I don't know. I would really like it if I had more space to actually show you this, but I don't think I do. I can try adjusting you. maybe a belt. Just to, you know, nip it in. I don't know. Maybe not. One thing I haven't mentioned, which you might have seen now because I just did, obviously I did these in the round, these sleeves, and I did mess up a little bit on the increases because on the original pattern it's knitted flat and it just said to make it all white where you increase, and I thought that would look really weird just having one long white patch. So I added some bunnies, but you have to have the amount of stitches for a full bunny to fit one in and the space on each side, so I ended up having just one row of bunnies, so I still got the white increases anyway. But I forgot to do it on the other side. I started the bunnies at some, like, on the 9th round of bunnies or something instead of the 5th. And I also have not finished duplicate stitching these bunnies in, to the point where there is thread hanging off of this jumper. My duplicate stitch is the ugliest stitch you've ever seen. It's so unattractive. Here we go. I can't even get my arm in the right angle. This bumpy part is where I was pulling the yarn way too tight on the sleeves with my magic loop, and it wasn't until I was somewhere up here, yeah, about here, that I was like, oh yeah, I've got to stop pulling really tightly on that. So this part's smooth and this part's all ugly and bobbly, and this is the part that I missed out on the bunnies. So I'm duplicate stitching it, but it's so ugly. I'm not sure what's worse, the green duplicate stitch or the puffy parts, but no one's gonna see that, it's fine. It's down here, so no one's gonna see, just me. So I'm gonna add maybe another 3 duplicate stitch bunnies here and hope that over time with blocking and wearing they'll like blend and merge in and all will be well. Anything else to say? I would say that is everything about this jumper, I think. Editing Emily here. I forgot to tell you something fascinating about my jumper. It weighs 299 grams and it is the equivalent of about 1,046 meters, which is mad. That's like a kilometer of knitting. A kilometer of knitting in this. It's fascinating. I may have cast it on my New Year's jumper. Just cast on, nothing to even show you, it's literally a cast on. But I would tell you my plans. I have decided to start my Star Serenade vintage jumper now. I thought I could wait, but I really want to make it like, I want to make the yoke part and then I can knit all the plain stockinette whilst I am on the on the plane to the UK where I go next week. I'm going to have lots of knitting time without having to concentrate on stitch patterns or colourwork charts. So I'm doing the yoke first and I'm changing it up for several reasons. Number one, I have to have that exact stitch count for the chart that goes across. It's not like this one where I could have taken out a bunny here or added a bunny or whatever. This is an exact amount of stitches I have to have, and it has to be the exact distance between here and here on my body. So the gauge has to be spot on. And of course, I'm not using the recommended yarn. Yeah, if you're very particular about your knitting and following gauge and swatches and stuff, you are definitely not on the right channel. Unless you like to live vicariously through someone else and like, watch them mess up, so you don't have to. But I am not a swatcher, I don't do swatches. I have done them, but it doesn't matter because everything will change. Just like this jumper, I did the sleeve as my swatch and it was fine and everything's grand. And obviously changing, you'd have to do about 3 different swatches several times on different needles, and that is not pleasure or fun for me, so I'm not doing it. In this case, I am going to use the yoke as my swatch, and if it works then grand. If it doesn't, I'll rip it out and start again. Instead of knitting this flat, I've decided I'm going to provisionally cast on where the stitch count starts for this section. I'm provisionally casting on, then I'm going to follow the chart and I'm going to do it in the round. I'm going to add steek stitches down the sides because the front and the back are the same stitch count. It's just the back of the pattern is plain to my knowledge. It just says on the pattern knit back as front, but it doesn't mention the chart. And I would say normally they don't have this chart on the back of the jumper, but if they do, then bonus, I'm following the pattern. If not, I'm having the chart on the front and the back. So I'm adding steek stitches down the sides, and then once I've knitted it in the round and I've checked my gauge and everything is okay, I can cut those stitches and I will then, well, I'll knit it in the round, knit here, knit down, then I will cut the stitches and I can seam them in with the sleeves and all will be hunky-dory. And I wouldn't have had to knit the whole thing flat and have this weird gauge mayhem, because my tension is pretty tight, not in a ugly way, like when you look at the knitting it's not really tight and you can't stretch it or pull it or nothing's all puckered and bunched together. It just seems like when I knit with colourwork it comes out tighter, and that is good if you're using sport weight yarn for a vintage pattern, because I need to get about 7 stitches per 2.5 centimeters. No? Yes. Yes, I need about that, about 28 stitches in 10 centimeters to get this to fit. So if I do that flat, I have absolutely no idea. My tension will just go all over the show, and yeah, no. No thank you. I did enough flat colourwork to realise it's really not my thing. I'll do it, but if I have a choice to play around with some new techniques and fun things, I will do that first. I am really intrigued to knit colourwork and steek so that I could put sleeves in. That sounds fun. So that's what I'm going to do. That is what I've started, and I will update you as we go, and hopefully it works. Yeah, this hasn't been quite as casual and like quick and speedy as I expected. I've just like told you immense detail about everything, but hey, that's what I do apparently. So I will leave it there. If I add anything else, you'll know about it because it'll be following up now. But I will leave that there and I will update you a bit more on my new jumper later. Bye.